In the late 1950s, in a small snack bar in rural Quebec, a customer asked for cheese curds thrown on top of his French fries. The owner reportedly said that will make a damn mess, and the word for mess in Quebec slang was poutine. That mess became the most famous Canadian food on earth. But poutine is only the beginning. Quebec is the one province that built a food culture so distinct, so stubborn, and so complete that food critics say it is the only true regional cuisine in all of Canada. While the rest of the country ate British and American food, Quebec spent 400 years inventing its own, in its own language, on its own terms. Number 19 was created by unemployed factory workers during the Great Depression and is now served in fine restaurants with foie gras. Number 11 is a meat pie so tied to Christmas that for many families the holiday does not begin until it comes out of the oven. And number 1 is the food that started as a mess in a snack bar and conquered the world. These are 25 foods invented in Quebec that the whole world now eats. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count them down. Number 25, galette de sarrasin. A thin buckwheat pancake, dark and nutty and slightly bitter. That was the daily bread of rural Quebec for centuries. Buckwheat grew where wheat would not, in the poor, cold soil of the Quebec countryside. And the galette de sarrasin became the food of the habitant farmer, eaten with butter, molasses, or cretins for breakfast, or wrapped around whatever filling was available for supper. It is one of the oldest continuously eaten foods in Quebec, a direct link to the French settlers who arrived 400 years ago and learned to farm a land that fought them every step of the way. Number 24. Soupe au gourgane. A thick soup made from the gourgane, a broad fava bean grown in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, simmered with barley, herbs, and salt pork. It is one of the most regional foods in Quebec, so tied to the Saguenay that many Quebecers from other parts of the province have never tasted it. The gourgane bean grows in the cool northern climate where other beans struggle, and the soup that comes from it is hearty, earthy, and utterly specific to one corner of the province. It is proof of how deep Quebec food culture runs, that a single region has its own signature soup made from its own signature bean. Number 23. Galette à la mélasse. Molasses cookies, soft and dark and chewy, that were a staple of the Quebec farmhouse kitchen. Molasses was cheap and it kept forever, which made it the sweetener of the working-class Quebec family long before refined sugar was affordable. These cookies filled lunch pails, appeared at every gathering, and became the taste of childhood for generations of Quebecers. They are humble, unglamorous, and completely beloved. The kind of cookie that a grandmother made by the dozen and that no store-bought version has ever matched. Number 22. Sucre à la crème. A fudge-like confection made from brown sugar, cream, and butter, boiled and beaten until it sets into soft, sweet squares that melt on the tongue. It is similar to Scottish tablet, but distinctly Quebecois, and it appears at every holiday table, every wedding, and every family celebration in the province. Made from ingredients that every Quebec kitchen always had on hand, sucre à la crème is the dessert of abundance, built from the simplest possible foundation, sugar and cream transformed into something that tastes far more expensive than it is. Number 21. Tarte à la farlouche. A pie filled with raisins, molasses, and brown sugar, thickened into a dark, sweet, sticky filling that was the pantry pie of rural Quebec. When there was no fresh fruit, when the cellar held only staples, the farlouche pie could be made from things that never spoiled. It is one of a whole family of Quebec pantry pies born from necessity and long winters, and it survives today as a taste of how Quebec families fed themselves through the months when nothing grew. Number 20. Grands-pères dans le sirop. Literally grandfathers in syrup. These are balls of dumpling dough dropped into boiling maple syrup, or a brown sugar sauce where they puff up and soak in the sweetness until they are soft, wrinkled, and dripping. The name refers to their wrinkled appearance, like an old man's face. They are one of the oldest Quebec desserts, a sugar shack and farmhouse classic that turns flour, water, and maple syrup into something warm and comforting on a cold Quebec night. Simple, rustic, and deeply traditional, Grands Prairies are the taste of a Quebec winter. Number 19. Pudding chômeur, the unemployed man's pudding. It was created during the Great Depression, reportedly by female factory workers in Quebec who needed a dessert that could be made from almost nothing. A simple cake batter is poured into a dish and a hot syrup of brown sugar or maple syrup is poured over top. In the oven, the layers flip and the cake rises through the syrup to create a moist cake sitting in a pool of caramel sauce. Born from poverty, pudding chômeur is now served in the finest restaurants in Montreal, sometimes with cream added to the caramel, pasta, sometimes with foie gras alongside. It is one of the great Quebec stories, a Depression survival food that climbed all the way to fine dining without ever losing its soul. Number 18. Sipai, a layered meat pie, sometimes called sea pie, built from alternating layers of pastry and various meats, often wild game, slow cooked for hours until the whole thing melds into a rich, deep, savory feast. It is a holiday dish of eastern Quebec and the Maritimes, a pie so substantial that it is a meal unto itself, requiring hours of preparation and feeding a whole family. Sea pie is a direct descendant of the sea pies that British and French colonists made centuries ago, and it survives as one of the grandest and most labor-intensive dishes in the entire Quebec repertoire. Number 17. Fèves au lard. Quebec baked beans, slow-cooked with salt pork and sweetened with maple syrup instead of the molasses used elsewhere. The maple syrup is the Quebec signature, giving the beans a distinct sweetness that sets them apart from Boston baked beans or maritime versions. Fèves au lard simmered for hours in the oven, filling the farmhouse with their aroma, and they appeared at every breakfast, every cabane à sucre, and every winter supper. They are the beans of the sugar shack, and no Quebec sugaring off meal is complete without them. Number 16. Godille, a soft hot dog bun filled with lobster, shrimp, or egg salad, dressed simply with mayonnaise and sometimes shredded lettuce. The Quebec answer to the lobster roll, the godille is a summer staple of the casse-croûte, the roadside snack bar, sold from stands along the St. Lawrence and at every beach and campground in the province. It is simple, fresh, and beloved, a handheld taste of a Quebec summer that most of the world has never encountered, but that every Quebecer knows by heart. Number 15. Pâte chinoise, Quebec's version of shepherd's pie, built in 3 strict layers, ground beef on the bottom, creamed corn in the middle, and mashed potatoes on top. The name means Chinese pie, and its origins are debated, possibly named after the town of China, Maine, where Quebec railway workers may have first eaten it. It was born during the Great Depression as a cheap, filling family meal, and it became one of the most beloved comfort foods in the entire province. Every Quebec family makes it, every Quebec child grows up on it, and the creamed corn in the middle is non-negotiable. It is served with ketchup, always, and it is one of the purest expressions of Quebec home cooking. First pattern break. Here is what makes Quebec food different from everything else in Canada. It survived on purpose. When Britain took New France in 1759, the French-speaking population did not assimilate. They held on to their language, their religion, and their food, with a stubbornness that defined the entire province for the next 250 years. While English Canada absorbed British and then American food culture, Quebec kept cooking the food of the habitant, the farmer, the working family, adapting French country recipes to a harsh new land, and refusing to let them go. Food critics have said that Quebec is the only province with a truly defined cuisine, and the reason is that language barrier. Cut off from the dominant English-speaking culture of North America, Quebec had the isolation and the time to develop something complete. The poverty helped too. Most of these foods were born from hardship, from long winters, from families with more mouths than money. Quebec did not invent this food despite being poor and isolated and outnumbered. It invented this food because it was poor and isolated and determined to remain itself. That determination is the secret ingredient in every dish on this list. Number 14. Cretins, a pork spread made from ground pork, onions, and warm spices like cloves and cinnamon, slow cooked with a little fat and milk until it sets into a soft, spreadable pâté. Eaten cold on toast, Cretins is the quintessential Quebec breakfast, sitting on tables across the province every morning. Popularized by lumberjacks who needed dense, portable calories in the woods, Cretins became a household staple, often sweetened with a touch of maple syrup. It is Quebec's answer to French roulettes, humbler and spicier, and it is one of the most distinctly Quebecois foods that exists, almost unknown outside the province and cherished within it. Number 13. Tire sur la neige, maple taffy on snow. Hot maple syrup boiled to a concentrate is poured in ribbons directly onto fresh, clean snow, where it cools instantly into a soft, chewy taffy that is rolled onto a wooden stick and eaten immediately. The tradition began with indigenous peoples who first tapped the maple trees, and it was adopted by the French settlers who built the sugar shack culture around it. Every spring during the Temps des Sucres, Quebec families flock to the cabane à sucre to eat tire sur la neige in the cold air, and it is one of the most joyful and ancient food rituals in all of Canada, a direct line from indigenous knowledge to the modern Quebec spring. Number 12. Steam. The Quebec steamed hot dog. While the rest of North America grills or boils its hot dogs, Quebec steams both the sausage and the bun, creating a soft, pillowy, distinctly different texture. Ordered steam, it comes with the works, and the standard toppings, mustard, chopped onion, relish, and shredded cabbage, are a Quebec institution. The casse-croûtes and snack bars of the province have served steamies for generations, and asking for your hot dog steam or toast is a daily ritual across Quebec. It is a small thing, a hot dog, but the Quebec way of making it is unmistakable and found nowhere else. Number 11. Tourtière. The great meat pie of Quebec, made with finely ground pork, sometimes veal or beef, seasoned with cinnamon, cloves, and savory, and baked in a flaky pastry crust. It is the centerpiece of the Réveillon, the Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve feast, and for countless Quebec families, the holiday does not truly begin until the tourtière comes out of the oven. In the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, the tourtière is a deep dish version made with cubed meat and potatoes, slow cooked for hours. Everywhere in Quebec, it is eaten with ketchup, maple syrup, or pickles, and every family guards its own recipe. Tourtière traces back through 400 years of Quebec history to the meat pies of medieval France, and it remains the most important holiday dish in the province. Number 10. Montreal-style bagels. Smaller, thinner, denser, and sweeter than the New York bagel, hand-rolled, boiled in honey-sweetened water, and baked in a wood-fired oven. Brought to Montreal by Eastern European Jewish immigrants in the early 20th century, the bagel evolved into something specifically Montreal. The two great rival bakeries, Saint Viateur and Fairmount, have been running their wood-fired ovens for the better part of a century, and Montrealers argue endlessly about which is superior. The Montreal bagel is chewier, sweeter, and more compact than its New York cousin, and people carry bags of them across the continent because they cannot be replicated anywhere. The wood-fired ovens do not burn. Number 9. Tarte au sucre, sugar pie. A simple pie filled with brown sugar or maple sugar, cream, and butter, baked until the filling sets into a dense, impossibly sweet custard. It comes from the sugar pie tradition of northern France and Belgium, but took on its own grainier, richer Quebec character. Sugar pie is a fixture of the cabane à sucre and the holiday table, so sweet that a small slice is enough. And it is one of the desserts that defines the Quebec sweet tooth, built entirely around the maple and sugar that the province produces in greater quantity than anywhere on Earth. Number 8. Soupe aux pois. Yellow split pea soup, thick and smoky, made with salt pork and sometimes ham, simmered slowly until the peas dissolve into a rich golden broth. It is one of the oldest foods in Quebec, carried by the fur traders, the voyageurs, and the habitants through centuries of Quebec history. Pea soup was the fuel of the fur trade, dense and cheap and nourishing, and it crossed into New England with Quebec migrants who carried the recipe south. It remains a defining comfort food of the province, the soup that simmered on every Quebec stove through every long winter. Number 7. Beignets de terre. Maple taffy donuts and the wider Quebec tradition of the beignet, the donut fried in the farmhouse kitchen and rolled in sugar or dipped in maple. Quebec developed a deep donut culture, from the beignets aux patates made with potato in the dough to the simple sugared beignets served at the sugar shack. Fried dough is universal, but the Quebec beignet, dense and often maple-kissed, is its own tradition, a treat that families made by the dozen during the holidays and that filled the farmhouse with the smell of hot oil and sugar. Number 6. Cigarettes au choux. Quebec cabbage rolls, ground beef and rice wrapped in cabbage leaves and baked in a sweet tomato and ketchup sauce. While cabbage rolls exist across Eastern Europe, the Quebec version, with its distinctive ketchup-sweetened sauce, became a family staple in the province, a hearty winter meal that fed large families cheaply. They are comfort food in its purest form, the kind of dish that simmered all afternoon and appeared on the Sunday table, and they represent the way Quebec absorbed immigrant influences and made them completely its own. Second pattern break. Here is the thread that ties this entire list together. Maple and pork and poverty. Look back through these 25 foods, and you will see the same ingredients again and again. Maple syrup, because Quebec produces 72% of the entire world's supply. Pork, because it was the meat a habitant family could raise and preserve through winter. And poverty, because so many of these dishes, the pouting chômeur, the pâte chinois, the tarte à la farlouche, the cretons, were invented by families who had almost nothing and needed to make something delicious from it. Quebec cuisine is the cuisine of a people who were conquered, isolated, and poor, and who responded by building one of the most distinctive and beloved food cultures on the continent. Every sugar shack, every réveillon, every casse-croûte is a small act of cultural survival. The food is not just food, it is the way an entire people said we are still here, we still speak our language, and we still eat our grandmother's cooking. That is why Quebec food feels different, because it was never just about eating, it was about remembering who you are. Number 5. Montreal smoked meat. Beef brisket cured for 10 days or more in a blend of spices, then hot smoked and steamed until it falls apart, piled high on rye bread with yellow mustard. Brought to Montreal by Jewish immigrants from Romania and Eastern Europe in the early 20th century, most famously by Reuben Schwartz, whose deli opened in 1928 and still has lines out the door today. Montreal smoked meat is distinct from New York pastrami, spicier and often leaner, cured longer, and it is one of the great immigrant food inventions of North America. A Montreal smoked meat sandwich from a 100-year-old deli is a pilgrimage food, and people travel across the continent for one. Number 4. Crêpes bretonnes, the Quebec crepe. Thin French pancakes brought by the earliest settlers and given their own life in Quebec, cooked on a cast-iron griddle and filled with everything from maple syrup and cretins to ham and cheese. The crepe is French in origin, but Quebec adopted it so completely and for so long that it became a staple of the Quebec breakfast and the Quebec crêperie. Served sweet with maple syrup or savory with ham and egg, the Quebec crepe is a 400-year-old tradition carried unbroken from northern France to the modern Quebec table. Number 3. Poutine's gourmet children. Beyond the original, Quebec invented an entire universe of poutine variations that have spread worldwide. Poutine with smoked meat. Poutine with foie gras, served at Au Pied de Cochon in Montreal. Italian poutine with bolognese. poutine galvaudé with chicken and peas. The province took its own invention and endlessly reinvented it, and restaurants like La Banquise in Montreal serve more than 30 varieties. This spirit of taking the humble original and elevating it into something ambitious is deeply Quebec, and it is the reason poutine conquered not just fast food, but fine dining in Quebec and now around the world. Number 2, Tourtière du Lac Saint-Jean. The grand version of the meat pie from the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, made not with ground meat, but with cubes of pork, beef, and often wild game, layered with potatoes, and slow-cooked in broth for hours, until it becomes a deep, rich, almost stew-like feast beneath a thick pastry crust. This is the tourtière taken to its most ambitious extreme, a dish so substantial and so tied to the holidays that in its home region, the word tourtière is reserved for this version alone. It descends directly from the sea pies of the 18th century, and it is one of the crowning achievements of Quebec holiday cooking, a pie that feeds a family and takes an entire day to make. Number 1, poutine. French fries, fresh cheese curds, and hot brown gravy, invented in the snack bars of rural Quebec in the late 1950s. There are several towns that claim it, Warwick and Drummondville chief among them, and the most famous origin story has a customer asking for curds on his fries, and the owner declaring it would make a mess, a poutine. For decades it was dismissed as crude rural food, mocked by the rest of Canada as something only Quebecers would eat. Then it became a Quebec icon, then a national dish, then a global phenomenon. Today you can find poutine in New York, London, Paris, and Tokyo, dressed up with lobster and foie gras in expensive restaurants, or served from a greasy food truck at 2 in the morning. But the true version remains the same as it always was, a paper tray of hot fries and squeaky curds drowned in gravy from a Quebec cassicroute. The curds must squeak. The gravy must be hot enough to soften them. The fries must go limp underneath. That is poutine, and it is the single most successful food Quebec ever invented. A dish that went from embarrassment to national symbol to worldwide export in 60 years. It started as a mess in a snack bar. It became the taste of Quebec itself, carried around the world by a province that spent 400 years refusing to be anyone but itself. Here is my challenge. The next time you eat poutine, remember that it was somebody's mess in a rural Quebec snack bar before it was on menus in Tokyo and Paris. And the next time you meet someone from Quebec, ask them which of these foods their grandmother made, because every single one of them has a family recipe for at least half this list, guarded and argued over and passed down through generations. Quebec built the only complete regional cuisine in Canada by refusing to disappear, and every dish on this list is a small monument to that refusal. Share which one surprised you most in the comments. I want to know if anyone outside Quebec has tasted cretins, or pudding chômeur or tire sur la neige on fresh snow. I want to know which of these you grew up eating. Because these are not just foods, they are the flavor of a people who were told to assimilate and answered by cooking, in their own language, the food of their grandmothers, until the whole world showed up hungry.